Hello, everybody. My name is Mirko Novakovic. I am co-founder and CEO of Zero, and welcome to Code Red. Code, because we are talking about code, and Red stands for requests, errors, and duration, the core metrics of observability. On this podcast, you will hear from leaders around our industry about what they are building, what's next in observability, and what you can do today to avoid your next outage. Okay, today my guest is Juraci Paixão Kröhling. Juraci is on the governing board of the OpenTelemetry project, and he maintains a few models of the OpenTelemetry collector. He's also a CNCF ambassador and previously a principal engineer at Grafana Labs. And now he has started his own venture, which is called OllyGarden, and we will talk about that a little bit. But welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Mirko. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, great. And we always start with a very simple question, simple but sometimes complicated. What was your biggest Code Red moment in your career?
Yeah, that got me thinking for some time. I had seen so many Code Reds before, either as a user or as a quality engineer. So I was a quality engineer before. But as someone, as a webmaster, as we were called back then, I think the biggest one was when I decided to start using some monitoring tooling, and I saw that one batch job that we had running, it always got locked for 5 minutes at the very beginning because of some database transaction. We didn't know that was happening, but it was happening every day at midnight. Nothing would happen for 5 minutes because something was locking a database. And we had no idea, right? Nobody was complaining. I'm sure that some users were browsing at midnight, but we had no visibility into that until we plugged a specific tooling back then. And then we saw those transactions taking like 5 minutes during the batch job. So I think that's what got me hooked into observability, actually. I mean, before observability was even a thing, I think. But that kind of understanding of your system is what really got me into this area here.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what was the problem? Do you remember?
Yeah, one very eagerly developer locked the transaction before doing a lot of very intensive queries. So they were just doing queries. So we could have had like an optimistic log or just a read log, right? But it was locking the entire database because it was touching so many tables to extract the report. And nothing would happen until the lock was removed. So yeah, the fix was easy. The difficult part was taking like a few months for us to even have visibility into this issue.
Yeah, no, I get it. It's and then you somehow went into the open source, open telemetry, back then open tracing community.
Yeah.
How did you get there?
That was by chance. I think as everything, right? Everything is kind of by chance at the beginning. I was working at Red Hat back then, and I was working on something that I think doesn't exist anymore. JBoss, in portlets, so Java portlets. There was a specification back then, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, to show how applications could be built in portlets. So you could assemble a set of portlets, and you can buy portlets from providers and have it as part of your portal. And we saw that portlets weren't really the future. They were winding down. As part of a sister team to where I was working on, people were working on JBoss operations network. So monitoring for JBoss. JBoss was an application platform, application server for Java applications back then. And I was working at Red Hat, and then it was very important to provide a management console and a monitoring platform for JBoss. So when we saw that portlets were not the future anymore, and when we saw that we had an architecture for JBoss operations network that was very old, we decided to change things a little bit. And then I got into the monitoring or I think we call it observability now, but it was really monitoring back then and management. And I kind of by chance, I stayed in the application performance monitoring side of the things. And it was around the same time that open tracing was starting to gain some traction. And we decided to, when we were thinking about a new architecture for this new system, we thought we should probably use open tracing. We should probably use open tracing primitives while doing the system. So that's when I started doing open tracing. So at the very beginning, doing Java things. So instrumentation for Java. So I did an open tracing EJB, open tracing CDI, open tracing, instrumenting things that I knew, right? So I knew Java was my role back then. So I started doing instrumentation for Java things until we eventually thought that, you know what, in this area of tracing, instead of doing our own thing from scratch, how about we just join Uber's Jaeger, right? So Uber had just a few months earlier announced that they were open sourcing Jaeger. So we went there to the Jaeger folks and said, you know what, our architecture for the new version of our tracing system is going to be very like what you have there. Just that ours is in Java, yours is in Go. How about we collaborate here and we join you? In the process of joining Jaeger, we asked them to donate Jaeger to the CNCF so that we would have a common ground for collaboration. So we weren't very comfortable in collaborating with Uber directly, right? So we wanted a neutral ground, and it was, I think, a turbulent moment for Uber back then in 2017 or so. And I think that was one of the places in my career that I'm most proud of, because we were able to get such a great piece of software donated as part of the CNCF, even with the logo, even with the name. And eventually, Jaeger became almost like a synonym for distributed tracing in open source for a long time. I think even today. So that's how I got into open tracing, and by extension to Jaeger as well.
Yeah, Yuri, right? Yuri was there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And he's there.
I mean, you triggered a lot of interesting things of my past when you were. I haven't heard Portal for a long time. I remember Apache JetSpeed. Right?
Oh yeah.
Yep. That was. I think at the end it was also kind of the reference implementation of the Portal spec, right?
Yeah. I think there was one from Pyara actually, it's a long time ago, but I used JetSpeed in 2002 or 3 or so. I was working at IBM, and they had like Turbine, JetSpeed, and all those cool things back in
WebSphere
the 2000s.
Portal server.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, absolutely. And then talking about JBoss, I also remember that it was essentially built around a JMX microkernel at the beginning, right? So everything was an MBean, which essentially is kind of the spec of Java to monitor things, right? To take a Java bean, wrap it somehow, and then you can access the metrics. And the whole JBoss server exposed all the metrics to JMX, right? Because it was built on top of MBeans. It was beautiful, exactly. And I really liked it. And so you could, at the time, really start monitoring JBoss better than anything else, because everything was an MBean, right? And you could connect to it. And I remember JBoss on the kind of monitoring platform was pretty cool. And you could change things, right? You could also use MBeans to change values and turn on logging and stuff like that. Yeah,
I think that's one thing that we had back then that we eventually ended up splitting, right? So back then we had these monitoring and management platforms, and it was very common for the monitoring things to change the running system. So JMX was one of those, right? So I remember the very I would say very 2000s UI for the JMX console for JBoss. We would go in there, and on one hand, we would see counters and gauges for the internal state of JBoss. And right below that, there was a button called deploy a new application or remove application and things like that. Yeah. Nowadays, our monitoring systems, they don't touch, like they're only observing, they're only looking to things. So they receive telemetry. We have tools that can collect telemetry out of the application. So in a way, they are interfering with the application perhaps, but they're not changing the running application, right? So they're not changing the configuration of anything. They're just collecting data and sending out. I think that was a very good evolution that we did. I'm not quite sure where we did this change or when our mindset changed, but I'm happy that we did it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, it was also the first time I came across is when I read the Dapper paper, right? And then Ben Siegelman, he started open tracing and starting pushing that standard. And that's how I came across this whole idea of distributed tracing at the time. I knew tracing, but it was different before, right? It was not so much focus on spans and the structure of a trace. So it was more individually by the vendors, like AppDynamics, Dynatrace had the pure pass. AppDynamics has business transaction. So everyone had a proprietary way of doing traces, but distributed tracing was the new thing. And I remember that I was fascinated and somehow scared as a vendor, because I didn't really know how this will change the observability world. And today I'm pretty sure that OpenTelemetry will become the default for tracing, metrics, and logging for sure in the near future. I mean, I can ask you if you think that way, but I guess you do.
Yeah, I do. Absolutely. So I think the road back in 2017 or so, that is when we started doing open tracing, right? So my very first KubeCon 2017 here in Berlin was on a talk on how we do Hawkler APM with open tracing. So that was right before, I think we committed to Jaeger already back then, by the time that I gave the talk. But we were in this transition. And back then in 2017, it wasn't very clear to people outside of this road what is a span, what is a distributed trace even. And I remember very clearly talking to someone at that conference here in Berlin, and they were saying, oh, you should do open tracing for the kernel events as well. To do so that S traces and P traces, they all become open tracing and so on. At that moment, it felt like, yeah, that could be like 2 steps ahead. But at the same time, I thought as well, that's very different than what is really tracing at the application level, right? So tracing for the kernel level is something that is very different than tracing for the application level. And for distributed tracing, really, I mean, distributed tracing is not about getting all of the calls that are being made method by method, right? So this is actually a non-type pattern. So when we instrument all of our systems and instrument method by method, that's really bad. And what we really are interested in when talking about distributed tracing is let me instrument my ins, my outs, and perhaps a couple of spans in between, just so that I understand what each service is doing. But it really just that. If I start doing hundreds or instrumentation for every single method call, function call, that's not going to work for distributed tracing.
I agree. I have to say, and I didn't want to go down that rabbit hole, but I will ask you because you're so familiar with the topic. I still see that people are struggling understanding spans and traces as a user, because it's actually a very technical way of defining a trace, because a lot of developers, especially if you talk to web developers, they think differently, right? They think in terms of requests or and so there's often a confusion that you say trace, and then it's somehow hard to explain what a trace is, because in open telemetry, the trace is an abstract thing. It's at the end of the day a collection of spans, and then there's a root span, which essentially is mostly seen as the trace, because the root span, if it's an HTTP root span, it looks like an HTTP request. So have you seen the same? And what do you think? I sometimes think we need a little bit more semantics around it to describe different types of traces, like an HTTP request, because that's something that I would say users understand much better than. And then you can also add some other semantics like the status code, right? It's 404, 200, okay, and these things to that request.
The problem begins by the realization that people are not taught monitoring or observability in college, right? So they go to university, they learn how to build operating systems, they know how to build databases. They don't know how to observe them. They don't know how to monitor them. This is not taught there. And I think when they realize that they need observability in some way, that's already kind of late in the process, like late in their careers, or perhaps not late, but not too early in their careers. So it is a topic that it becomes complex. It is complex. We need certainly more abstractions on top of tracing. We have some primitives there. I think we're very good at the primitives.
Yeah.
But we do need a way to convey that information. And I think technically it is what we actually need. So we need the abstraction of traces because we are never sure whether a trace is a request that is coming in, or it is a batch job that is in here, or if it's a new message that is spawning from a message queue. So we need a something that is not a request, but it is a request most of the time, right? So that's a trace. And the spans are the events that are part of the trace. And perhaps I think Ben, when he coined the term span back then, I think that was the right name for it. But I think nowadays, when I'm explaining tracing to other people, I say that spans, they are the events that are relevant for a specific transaction. So traces become transaction in this new lingo, and events become the spans. Now, I often, even in Portuguese, when I'm doing my side project on Fridays on my live streams, I use both terms at the same time. So I use traces and transactions. I use spans and events. Because I know that if I don't use the terms from Dapper, people are not gonna familiarize themselves with the terms that are being used everywhere in the industry right now. So we need to change the whole industry to use new terms if we need them. But until we do that, it is traces, it is spans.
Yeah, but I agree. I also use a lot the name transaction for it, or sometimes, depending on what I'm looking at, I say request and I agree, events is also a good name. But then you have the confusion with the span events, right? How you explain the span events of an event? So I totally agree. I think we have the elements. Technically, it's the correct way of doing it. But I think we are still kind of early in defining more semantical way of explaining it in a non-technical way, and that will help users to become familiar with it. But I also agree that especially tracing seems still to be an undervalued thing, right?
Yeah, but you know what is interesting, Mirko? I was talking to someone here from Berlin the other day, and she was saying that she was working on a tracing first company. So she understood tracing. She knows tracing very well by now. Since a few years now. And then she moved to a company that was not doing tracing. They were doing logs only. And she felt so bad going back. It felt like she was going back like 20 years because the way that things worked on a log only or on a log first type of application or company is way different than the way things work for a tracing first. So I think beyond the first in the first traction, beyond the first movement, like understanding tracing, it is hard. But once you do understand tracing, it becomes so much better than anything that we had before. You can extract metrics out of traces. You can extract logs out of traces. It can be your primitive. Spans can be your primitive for observability. Of course, there will be a point where you look at something like your red dashboard. You know which metrics you need for your red dashboard, right? So you need a request error duration. So when I know what I need, I can go and pre-compute metrics out of it. And store those metrics on a very inexpensive database, like a time series database. But for everything else, I can keep the high cardinality. I can keep the raw events or the raw spans on a specific database, on a columnar storage, perhaps, for my tracing first kind of questions. Right. So for exploration, I use my traces, and for my dashboards, I can use my metrics.
I can just tell from what I'm seeing at Dash0. We now have a little bit more than 50 customers. And if I always look at the data they are sending, and it's still more logs and metrics.
It is
than spans. I have to say, I totally agree with you. But what I'm seeing over years now, when I started in Stana in 2015, it was all around tracing, right? I thought tracing is like the thing, right? But I really learned that it's very hard to kind of educate the market around it, and people still do logs a lot, especially developers and SREs, platform engineers. They love dashboards, they love their metrics, and that's kind of the way they think.
Yeah, I think that there are two main audiences that we are dealing with, right? And at Dash0, you see that every day. There are the people who are configuring servers, and from servers you get logs, no questions, right? Perhaps you get some metrics here and there. From legacy applications, you do have logs as well as the first, the primitive or the primary type of telemetry. It is logs. For more advanced teams, from 5, perhaps 10 years ago, they were doing metrics as well. Nowadays, for teams that are really avant-garde, for teams that are really cutting edge of technology, they are doing tracing as a way of understanding their systems. Logs as well, mostly as a way to do an optimization, perhaps. So they know how to do logs. They have a very good tooling around logs, so they can do logs very well. So they do as well. But I think what we're going to see in the future is more and more maturity going towards the traces for applications, which is the biggest audience for OpenTelemetry. So sure, of course, we can get logs out of servers and convert to OTLP and send to a backend somewhere. But it's not where OpenTelemetry shines. OpenTelemetry really shines for application telemetry. And for application telemetry, things need to be correlated. Things need to be interconnected. And I think for that, once people understand and once people make the shift from logs and metrics to traces first, and then metrics and logs as an optimization scheme, then I think it will help us as a whole, as an industry as a whole. I think one of the difficulties that people had, perhaps for a couple of years ago, was the tooling around tracing. It was either very expensive or it wasn't good enough. And I think that right now things are changing and people have good tooling that is on par with the logging tooling that they had. So on par tooling in terms of collection, on par tooling in terms of transmission of this data, on par tooling for storage and search of this data. And I think nowadays we have some tools that are even better than their counterparts for logs. So I think at the moment we start having not one tool that is better than all of the others or two tools, but really an ecosystem of tools that allow people to move from 0 to 1 to 100 very quickly and in a way that they understand, in a way that they're comfortable with. I think that's what's eventually going to help distributed tracings.
No, I agree. I hope so, to be honest, and looking forward to it. I think about logs, and I was recently thinking a lot about how, at the moment we see OpenTelemetry in the observability space, right? But I'm talking to a lot of customers, also enterprise customers, and they are complaining that they essentially send the same data to very different tools, right? They send their logs to Splunk or CrowdStrike for SIEM, and then they send essentially the same data to an observability tool, and they pay twice, right? And they pay a lot for it twice. So how do you see that? Is that converging at the point that we will also see observability or OpenTelemetry not only for observability but also for security? Have you seen that already? How do you think about it?
This is a question we got even when I was doing Jaeger, right? So I remember a company coming to us on the community and saying, I want to use distributed tracing for an auditing system that I'm building. I'm building a product on top of Jaeger, and that's going to be auditing. And Jaeger, back then, the theory was transmission of data from applications to an agent. It was done using UDP. So we just make a package and throw over the wall. And if there's someone to catch this data at the other side of the wall, and if you didn't hit the wall, or if everything worked, then telemetry would be there, which is not enough for an auditing system. So I think the potential for non-observability use cases for that kind of telemetry that we are collecting, it is there since the inception. But I think within OpenTelemetry, it is very clear to us that what we are doing is application monitoring, right? So we are doing things that if you open OpenTelemetry.io, you can see that we have a very well-formulated definition there saying this is for the performance of your applications. I think at the very end of the statement says for the performance and troubleshooting of your applications. It is not for security. This is not for auditing. This is not for other non-observability use cases. We know, though, that OpenTelemetry has a potential for other industries. It's just that we have so many things to do. We have so many on our plate that we cannot just focus on everything at once, right? And I think it is the problem that you mentioned, I think it is very valid. I don't have an answer to that. I mean, I think there is a huge potential for disruption for the future when companies can perhaps have a data lake of sorts and have all of those vendors to consume that. So we are seeing some movement there, like with a bring your own bucket kind of scheme. But for that, you need for the entire ecosystem to work on a specific format of the data. So perhaps we are going to see something like that for OpenTelemetry, like we have a proposal for OTLP arrow, so we could store arrow on Parquet files, and if everybody accepts Parquet files, then we can perhaps have something like a data lake. But we as an industry, we still have this mindset that your data is my data, and it's not their data. So we don't share data with other parties, right? So I think that requires a change in mindset as well.
And now you started your own company. It's called OllyGarden. You can explain a little bit about the name. I know that you are still in stealth, so you can't talk about all the details, but I will try to figure out what I can get out of you. I mean, we talked very early, so I know what you're doing, but I just don't want to tell too much. So take us a little bit on this journey. You were a principal engineer at Grafana. You were working very deeply in the community. And normally, that's my experience, founders see a problem and then they see the opportunity to fix that problem. And so they found their own business, right? And it's obviously that also from the name that this is something in the observability open telemetry space. And so tell us a little bit what you can tell about what you saw and why you started your own journey here.
You are very right. I mean, last year I was at Grafana, and at some point I was talking to my now co-founder, but he's an old-time friend of mine. And he was always, we should start a company, and it's the right way, and we should do it. And I was, no, man. I mean, I'm fine. I'm okay. I'm where I want to be. I'm doing things that I like. I don't want to move at all. But then, it's the perfect storm is the moment where you see from different perspectives the same kind of problem, and it all converges into one thing. And that was that moment. So around the same time, somebody asked me a specific question, and I was, you know what, you were right. It was around the collector, right? So it's a question around the collector, why the collector is so hard to manage and so on. It's not hard. I mean, I work on a collector every day. I can do it like with a one hand tied to my back. So it's not hard. But then the more I thought about this problem, the more I was convinced that there was something worth fixing there. And at a specific point in time, I went to one of the people behind OpenTelemetry as well, and I asked them, what am I not seeing? Why is this idea so stupid? And they said, no, it's not stupid at all. And that was actually Ben Seelman, so we talked about him earlier. And he said, it's not stupid at all. You should do it. And I decided, you know what, you're right. And I actually thought about doing that as part of Grafana, but then I realized that a lot of the value proposition for that would be not to be tied to a specific vendor. So I don't want to compete with Grafana. I don't want to compete with Dash0. I don't want to compete with the backends. I think you all are doing a great job in there in creating innovation for data storage, for visualization, and what to do with that data analysis and so on and so forth. I think there's a lot of people innovating there already. And what we were seeing is if we saw a space where we could bring a benefit to the whole ecosystem by not competing with the backends. So we are complementing the backends, right? So that's our main idea. You asked about the name. It is OpenTelemetry, of course. I mean, that's all that I know by now. So I should not try to do anything else. That's not going to succeed. But I know OpenTelemetry. I can be very opinionated about OpenTelemetry. And I knew that Olly, I don't know if everybody knows that, but Olly is not only observability, but it's also OpenTelemetry, right? So O11Y, it's both. So it can translate to both. So I knew that Olly had to be in the name. And I was, what is it going to be? Olly Labs, Olly Mate, Olly what? And I was sitting right here, looking at my garden here, and an image of me planting tulips with my kids here in the garden came to my mind, and I thought, yeah, OllyGarden. So a garden full of observability experiments. So that's it. So that's where the name came from.
It sounds good. And how do you feel after a few months in? How is the journey going? When we started this conversation here before we turned on the microphone, you said you have never felt that productive, right? So
Yes.
tell me about it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm learning a lot, and things that I never knew things that I never thought that I would learn, like on the legal side of things, on accounting, hiring, hiring is hard. So quite a lot of things that we need to know now, that I need to know now, that I didn't have to before. And I think that's one aspect of doing your own thing. Like, you have to learn how to do those things. One thing that I realized is it is actually, even though it is a lot of work and you learn a lot of things, when you have an idea and when you are convinced about this idea, you can do it. You can learn it. I mean, those are all things that every one of us can learn, and the risks are not that big. I mean, I thought that the risk was going to be so big that it's going to be impossible to have a company of my own. It's unattainable, and it's not like that. The more that I read right now, it is clearer to me that I should have done it before. It is scary, but it's doable, right? So people who are thinking about starting their own businesses, as long as you are convinced, as long as you've done the research that you should, I repeat what Ben said, you should do it. Of course, I'm not successful by any means yet, but I am very confident that we can deliver something of value and we can be successful. And I said that I feel very productive because it's not only learning about legal, accounting, and things like that. It is really when you have to do everything on your own, you end up learning a lot of new tricks, right? So, and I think we are on a magic moment in our industry right now. I saw a blog post from you the other day on LinkedIn, not a blog post, a LinkedIn post the other day, where you mentioned AI tools and you ask your team to find tooling on AI to be more productive and so on. And I think, and that really resonated with me because I'm using so many AI tools right now, and they make me so productive, like code reviews via AI, or even coding with AI, or creating beautiful websites with AI, or I go to Canva or something, and suddenly I can have a beautiful design for my meetup here in Berlin, the hotel night. So, I can create things very quickly. And I think this also means that it's easy to start your business. And even if it's very small at the beginning, you can play eye to eye with the big names out there.
No, absolutely. I think there are two things here where I want to comment. It's what I've seen the past years when I did a lot of angel investments. I think the most challenging part of founding a company is understanding a problem and the solution for the problem, right? And that's what you have because you are very deep into the topic, right? You understood the problem really, really well because you were talking to customers, you were talking to other professionals in that space, and you knew that there is not a right solution there yet. And then you also understood how to fix it, right? If you have that and you can build it yourself, which is also a big advantage. I think if you have that, the rest, as you said, right, you can learn, right? How to create your incorporation in the US, how to get the first funding, and there are people like business angels. We talked a little bit. You talk to other people who can help you, right? I think this community is also very supportive, right? If you want to build a company, I think you always find someone who wants to help you or will help you. So, congrats that you did that step.
Thank you.
Exciting to watch. And then on the AI topic, I have to say that I was literally very critical looking at this thing, but over the last weeks and months, I'm really getting excited about it, right? Seeing what you can do. We experimented a lot with Claude, the new 3.7 thing on the coding side, but also using it inside of -0. And it's amazing, right? This agentic thing, when you give the AI basically your API, you ask a high level question and then it starts iterating. calling something, gets an error, calling something different, figures out things, learns, and then triggers the next call. It's amazing and scary somehow, right? To see how good. And what I kind of like the most is that I understood that it's acting very much like a human, right?
Yeah. With the reasoning part. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the reasoning part. Exactly. It really is, it is interacting, and you can actually learn something from the AI about the usability of your product, because if the AI can't figure out how to do something, you probably also get the same problem with normal users, right? Because they will also try a similar approach. So I'm really enjoying at the moment seeing those experiments and thinking about how to put that into your product.
I mean, it's so exciting in so many angles. One is I used a lot of AI to criticize my plans for the company, right? So before even talking to you, I used, I think, ChatGPT even back then. So I wrote a Notion page with all of my ideas, and I fed that into ChatGPT and said, what are the holes in my plan? What are the things that I'm not seeing? And a lot of it was crap, right? So a lot of it was like pure hallucination. But a few points, they were really good. And it showed me that even though I can discard like 50% of what it said, the other 50%, it's really valuable. And you can keep iterating, right? So AI is as good as the data that you put in. And I think it is, the same things that we talked at the very beginning of our career, like bad data in is bad data out. The same happens here, right? So if you feed into AI bad prompts, you're gonna get bad outputs. But the richer that you can, the richer the knowledge that you can provide to AI, the richer the outcome that you get. But I think so. That's the user side of things. Now, from the service provider side of things, I think that it is a very exciting moment for us in the observability area as well. So I'm not a front-end developer, but I'm doing the prototypes using those new tools. And when I look at the code, I think somebody has to maintain this code. Somebody will have to observe this code. So that's why I think observability is going to be so much more important in the future than it is right now. Because if I write a code and I see a specific problem on the screen or on my backend, or if I don't see data on database, then I kind of know already in which part of my code the problem is. I can just go there and guess what the problem is and try some fixes and deploy it and done. But if I've not written the code myself, or if I'm not that familiar with the code as I used to be, then I do need way better observability than I have on currently. And I think that's one challenge that we have as service providers for the future is how do I ensure that I'm observing the right things at the right times, right? So it's not about, again, instrumenting every single method call that we have. It's really about understanding on a deeper level what is going on in there. Some tools are good at that. So there is a try to fix this problem on some code, no code tooling, and it works. But as someone that is running a critical system in production, we need better tooling. We need better observability than what is currently being provided. So I think it is very exciting to be in this industry at this moment. Because observability is going to be way more important than it is.
No, I totally agree. And also you have, that's kind of something I need to understand better also, is that you have not only the human user now, you have an AI user.
Agents, yeah.
Agents to your system, right? And you also have to think, how can I provide that observability data also to those agents in a way that they can utilize it to help the user understand it, right? So I think you have different levels of users now, and it's super exciting. I really love to be in this space right now, and it's fun. So, and I think you're probably also thinking the same way in your space where you are in. So will be fun seeing when you come out. Is there any plan when you want to have something out there to test, to see?
Yeah, very soon. So we were at KubeCon at the beginning of the month, so in the first week of April.
Yeah.
And we've shown our prototypes to a few people. So we have a prototype that we prepared, that we deployed at a specific location only for KubeCon people. So my co-founder Yuri is showing the UI there to people and picking some initial interest to get some design partners. So we have some design partners already working with us that we got even before KubeCon. And but I think we are the moment that we get comfortable about the value that we provide to our users is the moment that we're going to get out of stealth, because then we know that we have the right dose of value or information. I don't want to give much details, but at the moment that we have the right set of insights to people, that's the moment we're going to get out of stealth and say, you know what, look at this. This is the result that those people here who helped us build the product, those are the results that they got. So yeah, hopefully soon.
Yeah, then Juraci, thank you. It's fun watching you, and I'm cheering from the sideline and seeing what you are building, and hope to see something running soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll keep you updated. Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks for listening. I'm always sharing new insights and insider knowledge about observability on LinkedIn. You can follow me there for more. The podcast is produced by Zero. We make observability easy for every developer.